Welcome to part 2 of Strongman Nutrition 101, where we're covering the macronutrients. This first lesson is about protein. So as we talk about protein, just remember that all of these macronutrients, protein, carbs, fats, do work in conjunction with each other. So while the goal of this lesson is to give you an understanding of what is protein, what are the different sources, and how much should you get, just know that you cannot have protein all alone by itself to maximize its effectiveness. You have to always have it with some sort of carb and fat in the grand overview of your diet. So very simply, let's explain that like a post-workout shake, which most of us know about. This is the recommendation that you've heard where you need protein with a carbohydrate source immediately after your workout to hit that anabolic window to start repairing and you're regrowing your muscles as fast as possible. So protein is that building block that you need to go into those tears in your muscle tissues, but carbohydrates are the delivery mechanism for that protein. So it helps kick that protein building block right into the area that it needs to go quickly, okay? Now, protein for every 1 gram has 4 calories. So there is some level of heat and energy to it because it does have calories, but it is your body's least preferred energy source. And your body will only use it as energy as that last resort when it's completely depleted of carbohydrates and fats. So you should not be looking at it as your primary fuel source. That needs to be your carbohydrates and fats. That's why we wrote here, it always needs to complement those, okay? But it should be still relatively high. How much? We'll get to that. When you're talking about your protein sources, there really are kind of 2 ways to look at this, like a complete or an incomplete protein, also animal or plant. So a complete source of protein has the entire spectrum of amino acids. As we're talking about protein as a building block, the building block itself is built of a chain of amino acids. So when we have a complete protein, that is the complete full spectrum of amino acids to make up a complete protein versus an incomplete protein, which does not have all of those amino acids. Now, this is not necessarily a like you should always have this or always avoid that, because some plant-based sources of protein have a lot of benefit to them, right? So if you are having things like beans or legumes, that is a slower digesting carb source with that protein, and it could also provide you with things like fiber, which to a point is good for your gut health, all right? Now, same with peas and like other vegetables that might have some small amounts of protein. They might have vitamins and minerals in there that you need as part of your daily diet. So you can include the small trace amounts of protein in there as part of your total, but those incomplete and plant-based sources should not be the majority of it because it's just a less efficient and less utilized source of protein in your body. There's actually a thing called the NPU, the net protein utilization scale, which is a measure of how much nitrogen is absorbed through that protein. Long story short, it is just the rating of how efficient each protein source is. At the top are all these animal-based sources. So actually egg, believe it or not, is the highest rating source on there, closely followed by whey protein, closely followed by milk. Then you have beef and chicken that are near the top of this scale. Now, knowing these things in specific numbers and worrying about it too much is not important. What is important is to understand that not only are your animal-based sources full of the complete scale and spectrum of amino acids, but they also are just more efficiently utilized by the body, okay? So once again, this isn't to say never ever have any plant protein. This is just where to have most of your intake coming from. You need to vary and diversify your sources because we do want to have a full spectrum of vitamins, minerals, and micronutrients to help us be our best, strongest, and most functional as human beings, okay? So what you need to focus on if you're unsure about what to do about all this is you need to make sure that you're hitting the right total amount of protein daily before you start diversifying. Because while there's a whole lot of benefit to getting different types of protein throughout your day, it does not matter if you cannot consistently hit high protein ever. Okay, so that's where we're gonna start, is we're gonna figure out how much protein do you need every single day. And then once you can do that and hit that number consistently, then we're gonna look to make substitution by substitution to just further improve and optimize every part of our diet. So just remember that as we keep going. Now, how much should you get? A minimum good starting point is 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. So if you were 200 pounds and 10% body fat, that means you have 180 pounds of lean body mass. That would be the right place to start. Once again, this is always in respect to total calories. So you need to make sure, even if you want to eat a lot of protein, that you're not overdoing it with your calories and you're giving yourself sufficient carbohydrates and fats to fuel your goals that you have as an athlete or just a person, right? It is possible to really increase this up to 2 to 4 grams per pound of lean body mass. Again, very dependent on the goal. One thing you do need to know as well is there's a myth out there that too much protein is bad for your kidneys. That's been completely debunked. Just not true, okay? But you should always prioritize digestibility, because if you have kind of too much of any food at once, think about that time or times in the past when you've been to Thanksgiving or a big family meal and you're just so stuffed and you get sleepy and you slow down. You know, that's not the state that we want to exist in ever, but it also slows everything in our body down because we're putting all of the blood flow from our body head to toe. It's going towards your gut to digest and aid that food. So you're not going to be able to think clearly. You won't be able to work out effectively. It's because of that digestion. Now, this also means don't have too much of this plant-based stuff because it's just harder to break down. A lot of that is due to the fiber, but it's all about finding the right balance. So nothing that I'm saying here, nothing that I will ever say to you is never ever do this or always do that. It's always about kind of giving you some guidelines to start figuring this out on your own. If you want to be a good, successful strength athlete, there is a lot of trial and error to figure out what is best for you. This includes your diet, but it also includes specific techniques on your list, different training approaches, this and that. So just kind of understand that as a successful mindset principle, that trial and error is necessary to find what works best for you, diet included. So back to what I was saying, always prioritize digestibility and vary your sources for micros, nutrients, and then always with respect to your total calories. So the other thing that I would like to cover here is how often should you eat, right? The other myth that's floating around out there is that your body can only take in about 30 grams of protein at a time. That's another thing that's just not true. A lot of studies have shown that if you are getting your total calories, protein, carbs, fats, all of those regularly and routinely within a 24-hour period, that you are going to successfully manipulate your weight in the direction that you want to go. Remember, energy balance. If you're in a caloric surplus where you're consuming more than you're putting out, you're going to gain weight. If you're consuming less than you're putting out, you're going to lose weight. So there is optimal and practical. You need to always do what is practical. It is optimal to have a regular supply of food and nutrients around the clock. So if you can have 4, 5, 6 meals a day, that is optimal, but not if your lifestyle doesn't allow that. You know, I've worked with clients in the past who are consultants. They have 2 hours a day where they can sit and eat and have time to themselves. So we have put them on a 1 meal a day, long-term intermittent fasting protocol that works successfully for both bulking and cutting. But the real reason that it worked is that they could stick to that with their lifestyle and schedule. Okay, there is no magic pill with any of this. We talked about this in the calorie section. Do what works for you, nail it down consistently, and then see how you can improve every so often from that. Just like with trying to figure out your total number of protein first, okay? It's much, much more important to nail the basics and then step by step get better and better and better. Now, I would like to just give you an example of what I currently eat in a day to give you some better idea of like what a diversified protein intake looks like throughout the day. So I start my day with, I have a smoothie that has some skim milk and whey protein in it. okay? My second meal is eggs and salmon and black beans. So mostly eggs and salmon in that, but black beans has a little protein as well. My next meal has primarily beef and sweet potatoes. So sweet potatoes would be one of these things that technically has plant protein, but it's not a primary protein source. I'll have some chicken after that with more black beans in that meal. And then I'll have one more meal that has Greek yogurt and more protein powder in it. So if we're just thinking about all of those, so again, that was milk, protein, eggs, salmon, black beans, sweet potatoes, chicken, beef, right? So that was like 8 or 9 different sources of protein right there. And the reason for that is all of those different things have different benefits to them. They have different micros and macros to it. And now, so yeah, that's that. Now, the kind of guess last thing that I would like to say here is when you're thinking about your calories and your food sources, remember that there are fattier cuts of meat and also leaner cuts of meat. So if you want to have a fattier approach to your diet, a higher fat diet, then think about things like eggs that have yolks in it, chicken thighs, fattier cuts of beef. This is also an effective approach if you're somebody that has a hard time gaining weight and needs to pack in more calories. These are pretty calorically dense foods that are going to give you protein and more calories in general. But if you're somebody that needs to go the other way and have a lower fat, higher carbohydrate diet, think about those leaner cuts of meat, chicken breast, some types of red meat, egg whites, whey protein. So it's all about just figuring out what you need and making the right decision. But there's a lot of different options, and I hope this gives you some sort of an idea about how to take some action with your protein intake. So following this up will be our lessons on carbohydrates and fats. If you have any questions, please reach out to me on socials, in the chat here, or on the Strongman Club. Stay tuned for more Nutrition 101.